Yo, what's going on, guys? Alex7 here. Welcome back to another TDU SC video test drive Unlimited Solar Crown. It's been a long time coming, but in this, I'm going over quite a large amount of articles and information that we have received since the last time I've uploaded, which is quite a fair amount. So some of these articles I'm just gonna go over, and I kind of picked the best parts of the article. I don't really want to repeat stuff that we kind of already know. So let's get this started. Now, the first article is from Xbox Y Gen, and this is actually a French translation to English, so there's a bit of issues with it. So I'm gonna go through with it with you though, so at least you can kind of understand it. But anyways, let's get straight on to this. Up on the screen, you guys can see. So Xbox Y Gen first asked, for you personally, it was great to tell you that you would work on TDU. So obviously, if you speak English, that doesn't really make any sense. But they're just asking Alain Jarniou about like what it's like to work on TDU. So he actually goes on to say about how he's one of the few people at KT who's actually worked on all 3 iterations of Test Drive Unlimited. And mind you, I do want to mention that this kind of has a mistranslation because there's 2 people at KT, and I've already told you guys this. David Aloza, who worked on TDU1 and TDU2, is also working at KT with Alain Jarniou. So it's not just Alain Jarniou who works there. Another key thing that I want to take from this article answer is that he talks about the pressure and everything, but the bottom piece is where he actually brings up that TDU is a lot different from WRC, because in WRC it was a yearly release, they had time to fix stuff for the next one, but TDU is a lot different. It's not like we're gonna get yearly updates, sequels, I should say, yearly sequels to Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown like we do with WRC. So they kind of have one chance to get it right first time around, which again, nice to hear. KT really wants to perfect this game, make sure it's well polished, and I can understand that, especially knowing that we have 2 people from KT who've both worked on TD1 and TD2. They know the flaws, they know what has happened in the past, so pretty interesting. Now, the next part of the article is when they're talking about the release, and this is what I said. Alain Jarniou is aware of it. He actually goes on and says, 2 was great, except its service crashed and it was a disaster. A month of sleepless nights for me. TDU2 was meant to be played offline as well, except that when it sensed you're connected to a network, you were supposed to be online pretty much all the time. Which is why, you know, it's nice to hear. I'm sure KT are going to make sure their network framework is as polished as it can possibly be, because when launch time comes, normally you do see a lot of hiccups on the network side of things. Looking at Forza Horizon 5 as a key example, but hopefully, I really hope KT makes sure that this is well made as soon as it comes out, because if this game doesn't do well, guys, we're not going to see another TDU for a long time. But anyways, let's move on to the next part of the article, and that is actually what he says here. So he talks about the fundamentals of the Test Drive Unlimited franchise, such as its progression and its economy, which Alain Jarniou describes as aspects that he wanted to be hard at the time of Test Drive Unlimited 2 in order to reward the player. And he explains that in Forza Horizon, in his opinion, that's what makes TDU, because you guys already know Forza Horizon isn't exactly the hardest progression thing that you can play. And he actually says it right here. You launch Forza, you spin a wheel, and he did it, and he had a designer who wanted to try the game, but he said, I don't have a supercar. And Alain Jarniou said to him, did he spin the wheel? And he wins the BMW i8 in 30 seconds. And here he says they have a defect in their quality. Their quality is that they have 700 cars. It's a sick thing, except that in fact they have too many. And in TDU, you have this emotional side with the car, which you don't have at all in Forza, which I completely agree 100%, and I'm sure you guys understand that as well. Forza Horizon, it just gives you cars. TDU was never really about that, and we like the progression, we like the grind, and it's very nice to hear him say that, just reconfirming our suspicions and our worries again. But it'd be nice to hear about houses. But another key thing he says at the end, this is a really well-regulated open world, very fun, but I find things that are missing that make you play TDU, and that is why people still play TDU, which is true, because you cannot find that game elsewhere. So again, reassuring that Alain Jarniou knows this, and he's going to take his time to make sure this game is the best as it can possibly be. So the next question is actually a pretty good one. They ask, how does it feel to be the studio of, let's say, a modest size next to the behemoths of EA, Codemasters, and Microsoft, which has 2 studios for Forza? How do you fight this AAA environment? And Alain Jarniou says, well, that means we move 1 foot forward, 1 in front of the other, and then that we develop the engine at the same time as the game. that's why it takes a little time. Well, little more time, I think is what he meant to say. Again, French translation, not exactly the best. But he does say it's the same engine as WRC. And he says, generally, when we finish a game, there's a moment we freeze the engine and we continue to develop the engine for other games. So suddenly, WRC's engine is a little less advanced than TDU. So again, when obviously so, KT had to upgrade the engine in order to make TDUSC. I mean, this is the first open world game, especially of its size and density, so it's gonna take a while. Just gonna have to be patient for more. Now the next part he goes on to say is actually, how do you choose the destination of the next game? So he says, full of things. They had the desire to go to Asia, an island, which is generally, and we like it for TDU because it's something closed. We don't have to justify invisible walls. Check, and I agree with that 100%. There's plenty of islands. Hope we still see islands in a sequel, etc, etc. And he also says a size that corresponds to what we could do technically. And that is also very true. Now, don't get me wrong, I did say Tenerife, and when you do look back, Tenerife is massive. For KT's first open world game, to even upgrade their engine to that aspect, it might have been a lot more work than I kind of originally thought. So, hey, TDUSC2, Tenerife, I got my Tenerife flag ready to wave. But the next part he says is that there are a few islands which are interesting, which we have studied. For TDU2, we went to Tenerife. And if you guys saw me on stream, I talked to you about that. I told you so. Test Drive Unlimited 2, they did look at Tenerife and they did plan on doing it. However, they didn't do it. And could have been size constraints, or they just didn't have enough time. But they ended up going for Ibiza or Ibiza, whatever the hell you want to choose it to say. But they ended up going with Ibiza. So moving on though, he does say, and do you have links with the government? Do you need various permissions? And he goes on to say, of course, we have stories of buildings' rights. For example, when we reproduce real buildings, the panels, the signage, the fact that they drive from the left. We like this kind of detail in TDUs, and we really like that you can feel like you're somewhere else. So road signs like there are in previous TDUs, especially real road signs that tell you which way to go to a certain city. Nice. And of course, building rights, I do understand. You guys also need to understand, you can't really copy and paste every single building on Hong Kong Island, because chances are you have to get the rights and permission to actually do that. So some buildings might say, no, we don't want our building in your game. Some might say, yes, we do want in the game. Some might say, yeah, sure, for a small fee. Some might say, sure, for a very large fee. So it's kind of hard to get that in, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be aiming for something of an accurate recreation. So moving on though, let's move on to the next subject that they talked about. This is near the end of the article. Alain Jarniou talks about indicators, windows, the hoods. That's one of the things that came back from most of TD2. And when we asked people what they remembered, turn signals was actually the second thing. I really want to know what the first thing was. I wonder if it would have been houses. We don't really know. Hopefully in my dev interview we can actually find stuff out like that out, which I will have more news for you guys in the future. But anyways, he also goes on to say we can't afford a Ferrari, and in any case I can't afford a Ferrari. I mean, neither can I. But there are plenty of people who can afford a Ferrari, which yes, but buying a Ferrari in a circuit game, it's not the same as buying a Ferrari when you drive with your friends, have it in your garage, walking around, is nothing. And Alain Jarniou is right. So he's really trying to capture what TDU gave us, and again, reassuring us that they're really going to take their time and make sure that they please us TDU fans. And at the end, he asks why it's not named TDU3, and a pretty obvious answer is it's not the same studio, it's not the same team, and it's licensed that they have on their own. And Solar Crown was the name of the competition from the previous Test Drive Unlimited game, and there's the Legacy of 2, but it's a new game, and it's KT's Test Drive Unlimited. So again, it's more of a reboot than a sequel to the previous one, but that's not to say that it's going to be a bad reboot. It's not to say that they're dropping features. Hope not. I really hope that they really please TDU fans. But anyway, let's move on to the next article. Now this is from Racing Games GG. Not much in this article. There are a few excerpts that I want to bring up here. The first one is when you're able to go off-road and climb mountains, it's not the same level of simulation like Formula 1 or a WRC game. The idea is to be more simulation than the Crew or Forza Horizon, which are quite arcadey. And part of the enjoyment of driving is to have something that's realistic, but not to simulation. But we want to give players the freedom to tweak driving aids to get something that's closer to simulation if they want. Again, reassuring. It looks like we're gonna get a more sim-focused open-world racing game, which we haven't had for a very long. In fact, I don't think we ever actually had what he's describing in open world. So again, nice to hear. We're not going to see that TD2 BS again. We're going to see something of actual worth. So moving on though, the next thing he talks about, and I kind of already went over this, is he wants the feeling of driving the right cars with the right feelings to be stronger in TDU than Forza Horizon. So it won't be a racing simulation, it will be a driving simulation. And when you're in a Ferrari or a Beetle, it's not the same experience, and you'll feel it. And that's important why you should love cars. Every car feels different, which again also kind of points to, I want to say, a smaller car list, which is fine by most of us. I don't think any of us really wanted 700 cars in a Test Drive Unlimited game. I think around 150 mark is something that is a lot more doable for KT and to have in the game. We're just gonna have to wait and see for more though. Now last but not least, from this Racing Games GG article, he also goes on to say that we know that people want to see more of the game. On our side, we'd like to show more of what we're done, but the game is in development. And he says, I think the game will be shown with gameplay trailers quite a few times, but we want to be sure we don't disappoint TDU fans. Nice to hear. And he also goes on to say, we know that every image and gameplay video will be looked at very closely and discussed, which is true, it will. And he'll show more to us as soon as possible, but he can't say when. He can say it won't be in years, but it'll be as soon as possible, which kind of gives us, I want to say 2023 is when we're going to be getting news next, but I'll probably make a dedicated video going over that later on. So next on though, he does say we want to show a very good and beautiful game. We don't want to go too fast and deceive fans. I'm very excited to give Test Drive Unlimited to the community, but I want it to be a true TDU experience. We're taking the time we need to make it the best game possible. Now again, saying all of this, really excited, but we're not really going to know until we actually see it. But fingers crossed, guys. I don't think KT are really going to miss the mark with this. They know what we've been asking for. They've gotten feedback many times. That's probably why they delayed the game in the first place, in all honesty. Now moving on though, the next article is from Gfinity, and this one is also pretty interesting. It's Alain Jarniou talking to Gfinity. You see, answering their question, he says he loves the license and he thinks it's the best driving experience you can imagine, so that's how they build the game. It's not that good a competition, he also mentions, but key things like turning around, seeing people looking at the car, selecting his options like in real life, which is a key feature from the dealerships in Test Drive Unlimited 1 and 2. And then he also talks about, I think even buying a car is an experience at Test Drive Unlimited, which is true. That whole experience made us feel connected with the car. Talking about opening the roof, blinkers, the full experience, and we're focused on driving rather than racing in Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown, because that's what it's all about. Again, nice to hear reassuring stuff from these articles. Also in the Gfinity article, he talks about this, and this was on the more interesting side about the physics. So he does say when they asked about where Solar Crown will sit on that scale, and it kind of came from the previous article as well about the best approach for handling, and they were looking to do something more on the sim side of the game, which again the previous article did mention. Not that much else from this excerpt, but I'll let you guys read it so it's still on the screen if you want to quickly skim through it. But again, it's just kind of rephrasing what we already just found out in the previous article. Now, the other article we have is from Screen Rants, and what was said was this, which is I think is a pretty good thing to talk about. So it says the WC series will feature one-to-one recreations of real-life locations. The upcoming TDSC doing so for Hong Kong. What kind of technical challenges go into such a large scale for these recreations? So Alain Jarniou says it's a huge amount of data, and as to how we get it in the game, we build tools to be able to modify this environment, because once you've got I would say the A map, which is a elevation map of the island, for example Hong Kong Island, then you get the roads, and you look at if the roads are interesting in terms of gameplay. We take the roads out there in real life, and sometimes you modify them to make it easier to drive or more interesting. And we even changed some pedestrian roads that you can drive on with a car, which by the way, he's not saying you can drive on the sidewalk. In Hong Kong Island, and I mentioned this in my stream as well, there are certain roads that are actually made for cars, but they ended up closing them down and just let pedestrians walk on them. So the roads like that is what he's referring to, which is pretty cool. He also goes on to say, people say that 500 kilometers is not realistic because in real life it's something like 450, But yes, they changed the roads to make it more drivable in the game, and of course added some off-road ones as well. So pretty excited to see what the actual map looks like, but we're probably not going to find that out until next year. Now the last part I want to talk about is actually from an article from 6th Axis, and this says, this is actually pretty key. It does say, and there's plenty of other ways to carry that tech over from WRC to TDU, and this is Benoit, who's a technical director of KT, and he actually works on the KT engine, and what he mentioned is they share the technology between WRC Generations and Test Drive Unlimited. And so we started developing our hybrid system on TDU, and if you aren't aware, just a quick little backstory, WRC Generations, which is KT's most recent and last WRC game, this season in WRC they have hybrid vehicles, and I'm sure we all know what hybrids are. So it seems that they actually developed the hybrid system for Test Drive Unlimited, Solar Crown, but they've actually implemented it into WRC Generations. So that kind of leads me to ask, if the hybrid system is in TDUSC, the likes of the LaFerrari, the Holy Trinity I should say, the LaFerrari, the McLaren P1, and the 918 Porsche, those hybrids, we could probably see an actual system being implemented for these vehicles. And I've played WRC Generations, and the hybrid system was done very, very well. I do enjoy it. So that's pretty exciting. Cannot wait to see this. But this is really good news, guys. It's actually pretty good news. But it also does talk about a lot of things for optimization as well, and tuning the gameplay per game specific, but the core features are shared between the projects. So stuff like the livery editor and the previous WRC Generations, the photo mode, stuff like that are stuff that's going to be shared between both games. But obviously stuff like the actual engine, which we learned is a little less advanced in WRC compared to TDU. But other than that, guys, that's all of the up-to-date information about Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. There isn't anything new apart from this. So if you did enjoy this video, leave a like down below and subscribe for more TDUSC content. You already know what it is. I'm like 7 guys. It's good to be back, man. I'm out, guys. Peace.